I'll make it worth your while. I promise. Oh, thank you.
Character actors' death scenes in westerns. The downside of not being a lead actor in a western may be you're expendable and likely to be killed off. Character or supporting actors are undeniably the lifeblood of the western genre.
I'd like to present an old admirer, Judge Roy Bean.
Today we will look at a selection and the many varied ways that they met their demise on screen. Shot, hacked, stabbed, hit, clubbed, suicide, or even natural causes.
You still like me, don't you?
If you enjoy this video, hit the notification button to get my new videos. If you want to check out my many other videos, head over to my channel. The link is in the description. Let's get into it.
From the rest of you.
Jack Elam. He was killed a lot. Some he was killed in. High Lonesome, 1950. The Sundowners, 1950. A Ticket to Tomahawk, 1950. Rawhide, 1951. The Battle at Apache Pass, 1952. Montana Territory, 1952. Lure of the Wilderness, 1952. Gun Belt, 1953. Cattle Queen of Montana, 1954. The Far Country, 1954. Jubilee Trail, 1954. Ride Clear of Diablo, 1954. The Man from Laramie, 1955. Wichita, 1955. Thunder over Arizona, 1956. Dragoon Wells Massacre, 1957. Gunfight at the OK Corral, 1957. Night Passage, 1957. The Comancheros, 1961. Four for Texas, 1963. The Rare Breed, 1966. The Last Challenge, 1967. Fire Creek, 1968. Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968. Hanny Calder, 1971. The Last Rebel, 1971. Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, 1973. The Winds of Autumn, 1976. Sacred Ground, 1983. Ward Bond, killed in these westerns. The Oklahoma Kid, 1939. Killed in a saloon by James Cagney. Canyon Passage, 1946. Gets clubbed to death. Fort Apache, 1948. Overrun by the Apache in the mouth of the canyon. Taproots, 1948. Dies of blood loss while being operated on. Dakota Incident, 1956. Gets an arrow in his guts from one of Charles Horvath's Cheyennes. Rio Bravo, 1959. Shot to death from a window by one of John Russell's men as he walks down a darkened street. Ben Johnson, One-Eyed Jacks, 1961, shot in the chest by Alicia Cook Jr. when Alicia fires a hidden gun from behind the counter while Ben is robbing the bank. Hang 'em High, 1968, shot to death, off-screen, by an outlaw. We learn of his death in a conversation between Clint Eastwood and Pat Hingle. The Wild Bunch, 1969, shot to death, along with his brothers Warren Oates, Ernest Borgnine and William Holden in the final shootout. The Last Picture Show, 1971, dies off-screen of a stroke. Dillinger, 1973, mentioned in the on-screen text at the end. He committed suicide in 1961. Actually, it was in 1960. Walter Brennan, Kentucky, 1938. Dies of a heart attack after his horse wins the Kentucky Derby. The Westerner, 1940. Shot in the stomach during a shootout with Gary Cooper in a theatre. Dies after making his way backstage to meet Lily Langtry, Lillian Bond. My Darling Clementine, 1946. Shot in the chest by Ward Bond at the OK Corral. The Far Country, 1954. Shot in the back by John McIntyre's men in an ambush. The Proud Ones, 1956. Shot in the head, off screen, by Robert Middleton. His body is shown afterwards when Robert Ryan and Jeffrey Hunter discover him. How the West Was Won, 1962. Hit on the head with a chair by James Stewart during a big fight. George Gabby Hayes, Wyoming, 1947. Shot in the back by Grant Withers while riding on the trail with the others. He dies shortly afterwards while talking to Wild Bill Elliott.
Remember what I said, Charlie? about trouble and people? Oh, it's all right. I'm way past due anyhow. She's all yours, Charlie. All my stuff and the whole KC spread. Don't let him take it away from me.
That's your nesters for you. I'll show 'em.
John Carradine, To the Last Man, 1933. Shot to death by Barton McLean as John was rustling cattle. Drums Along the Mohawk, 1939. Killed, off-screen, in the battle between the colonists and the Mohawks and Tories. His fate is revealed by implication when we see Chief John Bigtree wearing John's eye patch. Frontier Marshal, 1939. Shot off his horse by Randolph Scott during an unsuccessful attempt to rob the stagecoach. Stagecoach, 1939. Shot by Apaches as he is about to shoot Louise Platt in order to spare her from being captured. We only see his hand dropping his gun as we hear the shot. He dies shortly afterwards while talking to Louise and Thomas Mitchell. The Grapes of Wrath, 1940. Hit on the head with a club by a deputy while John and Henry Fonda are walking outside the camp at night. The Return of Frank James, 1940. Shot in the stomach, off-screen, in a shootout with Jackie Cooper outside the courthouse. John later dies of his wounds, off-screen, after hiding out in a nearby barn and trying to shoot at Henry Fonda. Johnny Guitar, 1954. Shot in the chest by Mercedes McCambridge in Joan Crawford's saloon, after John shoots Frank Ferguson. He dies in Joan's arms shortly afterwards. Billy the Kid vs. Dracula, 1966. Stabbed in the chest with an iron spike by Chuck Courtney. His body turns into a skeleton after his death. Edgar Buchanan, Texas, 1941. Shot by William Holden as he dies after Edgar has shot him. Tombstone, The Town Too Tough to Die, 1942. Shot by Richard Dix in the final shootout among the rocks. Renegades, 1946. Shot in the chest in a shootout with William Parker in the street. Coroner Creek, 1948. Shot to death by George McCready in the jailhouse, after Edgar refuses to release Douglas Fowley and Forrest Tucker. Lust for Gold, 1949. Shot in the back by Glenn Ford, after they have killed Arthur Honeycutt and Antonio Moreno, and Edgar is looking at the hoard of gold in the cave. Devil's Doorway, 1950. Shot in the chest, off-screen, in a crossfire shootout with Robert Taylor and his tribe. His body is shown afterwards. Rawhide, Desperate Siege, 1951. shot in the back by Jack Elam and George Tobias. The Big Trees, 1952, shot in the chest by a couple of hired guns when he pushes Kirk Douglas out of the way of an ambush. Destry, 1954, gunned down by Alan Hale Jr. as he reaches for a hidden gun to shoot the unsuspecting Audie Murphy. Wichita, 1955, shot to death by Walter Coy as Edgar is about to kill Joel McRae. Ride the High Country, 1962, presumably killed off-screen by the Hammond brothers after learning he had shown James's marriage papers to Marriott Hartley. We last see him approached with anger. It's very likely he was killed. Gunpoint, 1966, shot dead by Morgan Woodward when Morgan's gang attacks the posse camp. Bruce Stern, The War Wagon, 1967, shot to death by Kirk Douglas during a shootout between Bruce and Gene Evans against Kirk and John Wayne. Will Penny, 1968, beaten to death with a rifle by Lee Majors. Hang 'em High, 1968, executed by hanging along with 5 other prisoners. The Cowboys, 1972, dragged to death after his leg got tangled in his horse reins. Wild Bill, 1995, shot to death by Jeff Bridges. The Hateful Eight, 2015, shot in the chest by Samuel L. Jackson when he pulls his gun on Samuel after Samuel admits to killing his son, Craig Stark. His body is shown soon afterwards as Michael Madsen and James Parks take it outside. Badland, 2019, shot by James Russo. He slowly dies while his daughter, Mira Savino, cries by his side, followed by his funeral. Butch Cassidy and the Wild Bunch, 2022, shot by Jeff Mead.
You took the life from my brother, and you left me a crippled old man in a wheelchair. You, sir, will die!
Lee Marvin, Cave of Outlaws, 1951, killed when a train robber throws a knife into his back to stop the train. Hangman's Knot, 1952, shot twice in the chest by Claude Jarman Jr., just as Lee is about to shoot Randolph Scott. The Stranger Wore a Gun, 1953, shot to death by Randolph Scott. Gun Fury, 1953, shot in the back by Pat Hogan as he tries to get to the horses. The Raid, 1954, shot to death by Van Heflin after Lee drunkenly threatens the congregation in a church. 7 Men From Now, 1956, shot in the chest in a shootout with Randolph Scott. Raintree County, 1957, shot by either DeForest Kelley or a Confederate soldier. He dies of his wounds shortly afterwards. The Comancheros, 1961, shot by John Wayne. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, 1962, shot in the chest by John Wayne, who fires from the shadows during Lee's showdown with James Stewart in the street. Cat Ballou, 1965, playing a dual role as hero and villain. The villain, Strawn, is shot to death, off-screen, by the hero Kid Shalene. We only see Shalene walk out of the showdown afterwards, wearing Strawn's nose guard as a joke before revealing his true identity. The Spikes Lee Gang, 1974, shot to death in a shootout with Gary Grimes, whom he mortally wounds.
Liberty! Liberty!
A man can do that.
Yeah. Anytime you're ready, Sheriff.
Strother Martin, cowboy, 1958, bitten by a rattlesnake. He dies shortly afterwards with the other cowhands gathered around him. Showdown, 1963, unarmed and innocent. He is shot down by the marshal's men when he comes out of the express office, which has just been raided. An Eye for an Eye, 1966, shot multiple times by Robert Lansing after Strother has gunned down Patrick Wayne. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969, shot in the chest by bandits while transporting payroll through the mountains. The Wild Bunch, 1969, killed off-screen with Paul Harper and L.Q. Jones. We only see a scene of Edmund O'Brien informing Robert Ryan of their deaths. Annie Calder, 1971, shot by Raquel Welch.
Interesting facts about famous people.